In this video, I'll show you how to make this text animation in Figma natively using Smart Animate. I'll also show you a tip that I've been using that has changed my workflow in Figma that's helped me be able to create more advanced animations. Before we jump into Figma, let's just have a quick chat about animations and why it's so helpful that you can pull off animations like this in Figma natively. So animations in web design can really help take designs just that little bit of a notch up. So of course you need to have great UI and UX, but animation can just be that cherry on top. Previously, as a web or a UI designer, it was a bit tricky trying to make animations go from design to development, because one of the things that you would run into is that when you used to have to do designs in Adobe or Photoshop, you'd have to then open up After Effects or Premiere Pro and understand that software as well, and it would kind of mess up the workflow because you'd design something in Adobe or Photoshop and then you have to move into a different program and do the animation in there. Or if you stayed in Adobe or Photoshop, you could storyboard it and try to explain it that way to try to get your animation across. Sometimes though, the small details would get missed. Or trying to explain to a client when you're presenting the work, when it's still designed and it's static, just saying, yeah, trust me, when this goes into development and you see these animations, it's going to look even cooler. And you're just having to explain it with words, you can't actually visually show something. And this could be the thing that really just makes or breaks or pushes the design over the edge compared to if it needs to go back for another round of revision. But now with great tools like Figma, you can achieve all these animations using Smart Animate and Prototype. It doesn't break up the workflow, you can stay all in Figma and it really speeds up the process. I before used to only use Smart Animate for interaction design, so hovers and click animations and interactions like that. But recently I've been experimenting more complex animations and I've been surprised actually how much you can achieve with Smart Animate in Figma. This is great as well because it counters those 2 points I just said. When you're presenting to a client, you can actually show them the prototype and show them all the animations and how it's intended to do, which can save you time and also just wow the client. And also if you're passing it over to a developer who's maybe a third party or something like that, you can make sure that it's all packaged up and you can visually show them and walk them through the animation. So when they're developing it, they have something to base it off. This will save you a lot of time as well, having to do back and forth with a developer doing quality checks. It just helps streamline the process for everyone. In Figma, this is what the final animation is going to look like, with the text loading like this and the text loading one after the other with the delay, and then also down below with this text effect as well. As we go into it, this is the final frame, but we'll start at the beginning. So coming across here, this is how it starts. So we have our layout here, but the animation isn't applied yet and we haven't set it up. So the first thing we want to do with these words is break them up. So we want to actually be able to load them individually. So we need to break them up from one long paragraph that you would normally use to individual words. So I've broken them up now into individual words. So simplifying, financial, and management. They're all in individual text boxes. So we'll drag this first one across. I'm just going to leave one there and turn down the opacity a little bit. More just a guide. When I bring back in the animated one, I'll know where to put it. So this is one of the big things I found about Smart Animate and animations in Figma, is that previously I used to rely on things going across frames and I would animate between going from one frame to the other one. The big difference now that I use is that I actually do a lot of the animation within components. So this way I find that you can finesse it a lot more. And previously when I used to do it across frames, it would become really frustrating if I wanted to change things, as I'd have to change it across multiple frames. But if you have it as a centralized component, you can make the animation updates to the component and then it's a lot faster workflow. I created this as a component. We're going to add a variant. We'll name this first one preload, change property name to state, and then we'll create another variant and we'll call this second one loaded. Just position them next to each other so it's easier to see. So to achieve this sort of animation, one of the big shortcuts is using the feature clip content. So what clip content does is you see this purple bounding box around here. Clip content is off. Double click in to select the text. So right now, one click, I've selected the text box, double click in, and now it's underlined. I'm selecting the text box. If I drag this and it goes outside the box, nothing happens. You can still see it. If I go back to the text box and I select the feature clip content, you actually can't see it anymore. So it makes clip content, it more or less turns this into a window. So you can see through the window, and then when you drag it outside the window, it's kind of behind a wall and you can't see it anymore. So we'll drag it back up. So to achieve this animation is you want to apply a rotation to it. Because I want the first letter to appear first, I want to make sure that I do a minus rotation of 15 degrees. You can play around with this. It's not a science of it has to be exactly minus 15 degrees. I just found that as a good number for this. Another way I've used to achieve this animation is I've broken up all the characters so it looks like they load one after another, which is another way to do it. This way is just much faster. So now that you've applied the -15 rotation, you want to drag it below. Another thing to know is that it helps if you hold down spacebar when you're dragging something out of a bounding box, because sometimes it will degroup if you don't hold space. So we'll hold space, we'll drag it all the way below so you can't see it anymore. And now we'll select the bounding box, come up to prototype, drag a noodle from preload to loaded, and you can set up the settings here. So we'll actually change this to after delay, and we want it to load after 10 milliseconds to loaded. And then you can set this to whatever. I've been playing around a bit with custom at the moment and experimenting with it. You don't have to use custom. You can use any of these ease out, ease in, or linear, or whatever kind of animation you want. So now that we've done that, let's just drag this back into the frame just so you can see what it looks like. A good tip here is to turn it back to the loader so you can actually see it. Line it up with the template that you left there before, turn it to preload, hide this layer for a second. And now if we preview this frame, you can see how it loads. Actually a mistake though, because I didn't select clip content on the second variant. So go back. So this one had selected clip content, but I hadn't selected clip content on this. So make sure you select clip content on both. Preview it, there you go. So now repeat the process with the other ones. Could just duplicate this first variant and then put financial into the second one, and then duplicate it again and put management. But the reason that I'm not doing that, because I want them to load at a different speed, because I want it to be set up not on click, but to be set up automatically after delay. So the first one was 10 milliseconds. So now you're playing around with, if you've ever done animation with After Effects, or if you've ever used Premiere Pro and stuff, you can understand the sequencing of it. So now I'm starting to think about the sequencing of, if I want the first one to load at 10 milliseconds, when do I want the next one to load? Probably halfway through the first word coming up, I want the second one to probably appear. So now I've just repeated the same process. So now the next thing as well is with this sort of thing, you follow a similar process again. You're going to drag some text across, make this a component, add a variant, same process as before. The only difference here is I want to make the after the delay a bit longer, because this is kind of in the second section. It's not in the hero section. And also with this one, I want it to be the same animation. I don't want it to be delayed after each line. I want all the lines to come out at the same time. So I've just applied auto layout to the box, and then I'll paste the first one in, change it to loaded so I can see it. And then if I just paste the same amount of components in here as there is lines, because they're all going to be the same, to speed up, I can just copy the word and then paste it into each of these components instead of having to create different components for all of them. The last thing as well to achieve this scroll effect that I'm doing, I find this not too hard to do now with just the same process before of making it components. So I know this is going to be the first frame, and then I'll add a variant. This will be state. This can be first. Add another screen, so then it will be second. Apply auto layout on the box. Make sure this has clip content on it, and then I want to just drag the frame up to where I want it to be. And now the difference here, I want this second one, I wanted to make sure it looks like it's scrolled down. So over here in the layers panel, I want to select everything within the frame and drag it up, hold space, to where I want the second spot to be. Then I'll click the first one and drag a prototype noodle from the first one to the second one and do on click. So when I click, it will change from here to here and it'll look like it's scrolling down. If we click present, we can see our finalized animation. And we achieve this all natively with just Smart Animate in Figma. Figma is always updating and releasing new features, so you used to not be able to pull off this kind of animation, but you can now with Smart Animate. Recently at Config, they just announced a heap of new killer features. Watch this video as I explain one of the big changes to auto layout, as it changes fundamentally how you use auto layout now.